Have you ever wondered why Marlon Brando's motorcycle in The Wild One became the ultimate symbol of rebellion? So, what if I told you that the Triumph Thunderbird he rode wasn't actually his first choice? And the film's production involved secret modifications that Triumph desperately tried to hide? The bike that defined motorcycle culture forever held secrets even hardcore riders never discovered. Today, we're counting down 20 weird facts about Marlon Brando's Triumph Thunderbird from The Wild One that will completely change how you see this legendary film. From studio-mandated bike swaps to a paint job that caused international controversy, these revelations might just blow your mind. So, buckle up, hit that like button if you love classic motorcycles and film history, and let's ride into the secrets behind Hollywood's most iconic bike. Number 20. Brando. Originally wanted a Vincent Black Shadow. Marlon Brando didn't want the Triumph Thunderbird that made him famous. He specifically requested a Vincent Black Shadow, the world's fastest production motorcycle at the time. The Vincent was a brutally powerful British superbike with a 1,000 cubic centimeter V twin engine that could reach speeds exceeding 120 miles per hour. Brando had seen one at a California motorcycle shop and became obsessed with it. He believed Vincent's aggressive styling and raw power perfectly matched Johnny Strabler's dangerous character. Columbia Pictures absolutely refused his request. The Vincent Black Shadow cost nearly 3 times what a Triumph Thunderbird cost, and the studio was already over budget. More importantly, insurance companies wouldn't cover a Vincent for film production. The bikes had a notorious reputation for being difficult to handle and mechanically temperamental. Actuaries calculated the risk of Brando crashing a Vincent at roughly 80% during filming. The compromise was the Triumph Thunderbird, a much more manageable 650 cubic centimeter parallel twin that still looked rebellious on camera. Brando sulked for 3 days after learning about the switch. He initially refused to touch the Triumph, insisting that the production find a Vincent somehow. Director Laszlo Benedek finally convinced him by explaining they'd modify the Triumph to look even more aggressive than any Vincent. That promise led to some of the strangest customization choices ever made on a film motorcycle. Number 19. The tank badges were painted over to hide the brand. Look closely at Brando's Thunderbird, and you'll notice something strange. The fuel tank has no Triumph badges, no manufacturer identification whatsoever. This wasn't an artistic choice. Columbia Pictures deliberately removed all branding after Triumph's parent company demanded script approval. The British manufacturer wanted to review the screenplay before allowing their name to appear on screen. They worried that associating Triumph motorcycles with gang violence and juvenile delinquency would damage their respectable brand image. Columbia refused to submit the script for approval, so Triumph threatened legal action if their badges appeared in the film. The studio's solution was simple and brutal. The prop department painted over every Triumph badge on every motorcycle used in production. They used a special matte black paint that matched the tank's color perfectly, obliterating all manufacturer markings. This created a bizarre situation in which millions of viewers saw the Thunderbird but never knew which brand it was. Since Triumph executives were furious when they saw the finished film. The motorcycle was clearly identifiable as their product, despite the missing badges. But they'd lost all the free advertising value. British motorcycle magazines criticized Triumph's short-sighted decision for years afterward. Meanwhile, American riders recognized the Thunderbird immediately, and sales actually increased despite the hidden branding. The painted-over badges became a point of pride for Triumph, proving their motorcycles were so distinctive that they didn't need badges to be recognized. Number 18. Brando couldn't actually ride. When filming began. Here's something that shocks people. Marlon Brando had never ridden a motorcycle before The Wild One started filming. He'd sat on bikes at dealerships and admired them from afar, but actual riding experience? Zero. The studio discovered this problem 3 weeks before production, when Brando showed up for his first stunt rehearsal, and immediately dropped the Thunderbird in the parking lot. Panic ensued. The entire film centered on Brando's character being a master motorcyclist, leading a gang of experienced riders. Casting had assumed Brando could ride because his contract stated he had motorcycle experience. Turns out Brando had lied on his resume, figuring he could learn quickly. Columbia hired a professional motorcycle instructor, Bud Eakins to teach Brando an emergency crash course in riding. They had exactly 18 days before the cameras rolled. Eakins worked with Brando for 6 hours a day, starting with basic clutch control in empty parking lots, and gradually building to street riding. Brando proved to be a natural athlete who learned quickly, but 18 days wasn't enough to master the Thunderbird's quirky handling characteristics. For wide shots and any riding faster than 20 miles per hour, Eakins himself doubled for Brando, wearing an identical leather jacket and cap. If you watch carefully, you can spot the differences in riding style between scenes. When Brando rides, he's cautious and mechanical. When Eakins rides, the bike flows naturally through corners. Number 17. The famous cap. Hit a secret radio receiver, that iconic tilted cap Brando wore wasn't just a fashion statement. It concealed a secret radio receiver that allowed the director to give Brando instructions during riding scenes. Since Brando was an inexperienced rider, Benedek needed a way to coach him through complex maneuvers without stopping for rehearsal between every take. The solution came from the film's sound department. They built a tiny radio receiver that fit inside the cap's crown, with a nearly invisible wire running down to an earpiece hidden under Brando's hair. During riding scenes, Benedek could speak into a microphone, and Brando would hear instructions in real time. Easy on the throttle. Start your turn now. Or, slow down, you're going too fast. The system worked brilliantly for simple riding sequences. However, it created problems during dialogue scenes. The radio occasionally picked up interference from nearby radio stations or police frequencies. In one memorable incident, Brando burst out laughing during a tense confrontation scene because he'd suddenly heard a commercial for laundry detergent in his earpiece. The radio cap was used throughout the first 3 weeks of filming until Brando's riding improved enough that he no longer needed constant instruction. The prop department then removed the electronics, and Brando continued wearing the cap purely for its iconic look. The original radio-equipped cap supposedly still exists in a private collection, though its current owner has never publicly confirmed having it. Number 16. 3 identical Thunderbirds were used, but only one survived. The production actually used 3 supposedly identical Triumph Thunderbirds, each built to exact specifications for different purposes. Bike number 1 was the hero motorcycle for all close-ups and dialogue scenes. Bike number 2 handled the moderate action and riding sequences. Bike number 3 was the expendable stunt bike for crashes and rough treatment. Each bike started life as a stock, so 1953 Thunderbird, purchased from the same California dealer on the same day. The customization happened simultaneously in a rented garage, where mechanics modified all 3 bikes identically. They removed fenders, shortened exhaust pipes, installed wider handlebars, and applied that distinctive black paint scheme. The modifications took 6 weeks and cost more than the motorcycles themselves. Despite being built identically, the 3 bikes developed different personalities during filming. The hero bike ran smoothly, but the engine leaked oil constantly. The action bike handled perfectly, but burned through clutches at an alarming rate. The stunt bike was mechanically bulletproof, but looked increasingly rough as filming progressed. When production wrapped, Columbia sold bikes 2 and 3 to crew members for practically nothing. Both were ridden hard, modified beyond recognition, and eventually scrapped. Only the hero bike survived, purchased by a collector who recognized its historical importance. That sole surviving Thunderbird changed hands several times over the decades, with its value increasing exponentially. It last sold at auction in 2015 for $128,000 to an anonymous buyer. Number 15. The handlebars were bent, specifically for Brando's posture. Those distinctive high-rise handlebars weren't a style choice. They were specifically bent to accommodate Marlon Brando's unusual riding posture and shoulder flexibility. During early test riding, the cinematographer noticed Brando looked awkward and uncomfortable on the stock Thunderbird bars. His shoulders were too high, and his back was too straight, making him look stiff and inexperienced on camera. The problem was Brando's physique. He had unusually broad shoulders and limited flexibility from years of boxing and weightlifting. The stock Thunderbird handlebars forced him into a forward lean, cramping his shoulders and making breathing difficult during long takes. After watching Brando struggle through several riding scenes, stunt coordinator Carrie Lofton made a suggestion. They should customize the handlebars to fit Brando's body rather than forcing Brando to adapt to the bike. The solution involved cutting the stock bars and welding in extensions that raised the grips 4 inches higher and pulled them 2 inches closer to the rider. This created that distinctive high-rise look that became synonymous with chopper culture decades later. With the modified bars, Brando could sit upright with relaxed shoulders while maintaining control. His riding immediately looked more confident and natural on camera. The modified handlebars accidentally created a new aesthetic that customizers would copy for the next 70 years. What started as a practical solution to an actor's physical limitations became one of the most influential motorcycle modifications in history. Number 14. The engine was deliberately detuned for safety. The Triumph Thunderbird's legendary 650 cubic centimeter engine produced approximately 34 horsepower in stock form. Brando's bike made barely 22 horsepower after the studio's mechanics finished with it. This dramatic detuning happened because Columbia Pictures was terrified of their inexperienced star killing himself on a powerful motorcycle. The modifications were extensive and carefully calculated. The compression ratio was lowered by installing thicker head gaskets. The carburetor jets were reduced in size, restricting fuel flow. The ignition timing was retarded significantly, reducing power output throughout the RPM range. They even installed a restrictor plate in the intake tract that limited airflow to the engine. The result was a Thunderbird that accelerated like a scooter and struggled to exceed 55 miles per hour. Professional riders who tested the bike complained it felt gutless and unresponsive. But for Brando's limited skill level, the detuned engine was perfect. He could crack the throttle wide open without fear of the bike running away from him. The reduced power made the Thunderbird far more forgiving of mistakes with clutch and throttle control. Interestingly, the stunt bike retained full factory power because professional riders handled all the genuinely fast riding. The visual trickery of film editing made Brando's detuned bike appear just as quick. Nobody watching the finished film could tell that Johnny Strabler's motorcycle was actually slower than a Vespa scooter. Oh, and number 13. The leather jacket costs more than the motorcycle. Brando's iconic Shot Perfecto leather jacket is inseparable from the film's image. But here's something wild. That jacket cost Columbia Pictures more money than the Triumph Thunderbird motorcycle itself. The bike was purchased used for $240. The custom leather jacket, made specifically for Brando by Shot Brothers in New York, cost $375. This seems backwards until you understand the obsessive detail that went into creating the perfect jacket. Costume designer Earl Lewick rejected 11 different leather samples before finding the exact weight and texture he wanted. The leather had to be thick enough to look tough on camera, but supple enough for Brando to move naturally during fight scenes. Shot Brothers created 3 prototype jackets before Lewick approved the final design. Each jacket was hand-cut and hand-stitched, using techniques normally reserved for premium horseback riding equipment. The zippers were custom-made in Germany because American zippers didn't have the exact aesthetic Lewick wanted. Even the lining was specially ordered silk from Italy. Brando actually received 5 identical jackets during production because Lewick feared damage or loss. Each jacket required 90 hours of labor to construct. The total cost of all 5 jackets exceeded $1,800, more than 7 Triumph Thunderbirds. That investment paid off spectacularly. The Shot Perfecto became the best-selling motorcycle jacket in history, with millions sold over the next 70 years. Shot still manufactures a Wild One replica that accounts for significant annual revenue. Number 12. The famous wheelie was completely accidental. The most iconic shot in the Wild One shows Brando popping a wheelie as he rides down the main street. That moment defined motorcycle rebellion for generations. It was also a complete accident that terrified everyone on set. The scene called for Brando to simply ride past the camera at a moderate speed. Nothing fancy, just a straight ride by Shot. But during the take, Brando panicked and grabbed too much throttle while simultaneously releasing the clutch too quickly. The Thunderbird's front wheel lifted off the ground unexpectedly. Brando didn't know how to handle a wheelie, so he just held on desperately until the front wheel crashed back down. Director Benedek screamed, "Cut!" and rushed over, expecting to find Brando injured or at least shaken. Instead, Brando was grinning like a maniac. The accidental wheelie had given him an adrenaline rush unlike anything he'd experienced. Benedek reviewed the footage with the cinematographer and realized the shot looked incredible on film. The wheelie made Brando appear confident and reckless, exactly the attitude Johnny Strabler needed. They kept it in the final cut, despite knowing it was a mistake. Triumph's technical advisors were horrified when they saw the wheelie in theaters. They issued statements explaining that Thunderbirds weren't designed for such maneuvers, and riders shouldn't attempt to replicate it. Their warnings went unheeded. Thousands of young riders destroyed their motorcycles, trying to copy Brando's accidental wheelie. Number 11. The paint job caused an international incident. That simple black paint scheme on Brando's Thunderbird nearly caused a diplomatic incident between the United States and Great Britain. The controversy started when British motorcycle enthusiasts saw publicity stills showing the blacked-out Triumph. They were outraged that an American film had taken a beautiful British motorcycle and painted it murdered out like some gangster vehicle. Letters of complaint flooded Triumph's headquarters in Meriden, England. British motorcycle magazines published editorials condemning Columbia Pictures for disrespecting British engineering. Some writers suggest that the black paint was deliberately anti-British, a symbolic rejection of European sophistication in favor of American brutishness. The controversy escalated when a member of Parliament raised the issue in the House of Commons, questioning whether the British government should protest this cultural insult. The Foreign Office actually investigated whether the film violated any cultural exchange agreements between Britain and America. Columbia Pictures was blindsided by the international backlash. Studio executives couldn't understand why paint color had become a diplomatic incident. They issued statements explaining that the black paint was purely aesthetic, chosen to create visual contrast on black and white film. The explanation did nothing to calm British anger. Triumph eventually diffused the situation by releasing their own black-painted Thunderbirds in the British market. They called it the American Special Edition and marketed it as exotic and rebellious. British riders bought them enthusiastically, proving the controversy was always about nationalism rather than aesthetics. Number 10. The exhaust pipes were wrapped in asbestos for close-ups. Those shortened exhaust pipes created a serious problem during filming. Without proper heat shielding, the pipes radiated intense heat that made close-up dialogue scenes unbearable for actors standing near the motorcycle. During early test filming, actress Mary Murphy complained that the heat was blistering her legs through her costume when she stood next to Brando's bike. The solution was disturbing by modern standards. The prop department wrapped the exhaust pipes in asbestos cloth, then painted over it with high-temperature black paint to match the pipes. Asbestos was considered a miracle material in 1953, perfect for heat insulation. Nobody understood the health risks. The asbestos wrapping reduced radiant heat by roughly 60%, making close-ups comfortable for actors, but it created a toxic hazard that nobody recognized. When the surviving Thunderbird was restored in the 1990s, conservators discovered the asbestos wrapping still intact under layers of paint. Removing it required hazmat protocols and specialized contractors. The asbestos disposal cost more than the original motorcycle was worth. This detail represents how differently film productions approached safety in the 1950s. Materials that would trigger immediate shutdown today were used casually, without a second thought. Number 9. The speedometer. Cable was disconnected throughout filming. Every shot showing the Thunderbird's speedometer displays 0 miles per hour regardless of actual speed. This wasn't a continuity error. The speedometer cable was deliberately disconnected on all 3 production bikes. The decision was made by Columbia's legal department after consulting with insurance adjusters. California law in 1953 prohibited filming vehicles exceeding posted speed limits, even on closed roads. If the speedometer showed the bike traveling 40 miles per hour in a 25 zone, the studio could face liability and fines. The disconnected speedometer provided plausible deniability. The production could claim they had no record of actual speeds during filming. This legal workaround was common in 1950s Hollywood. Additionally, the bouncing speedometer needle looked terrible on camera. The Thunderbird's mechanical speedometer vibrated constantly, making the needle blur and jump. A static needle reading 0 looked cleaner and less distracting. For scenes requiring speed indication, the prop department created dummy gauge faces that could be photographed separately and composited in post-production. However, most scenes simply ignored the speedometer entirely. Modern viewers watching on high-definition transfers can clearly see the static speedometer, but 1950s audiences never noticed the detail on small television screens and theater projections. Number 8. Brando's boot heels were built up 3 inches. Marlon Brando Aziz stood 5 feet 9 inches tall, average height by any measure. But director Laszlo Benedek wanted Johnny Strabler to appear physically imposing and dominant in every frame. The solution involved custom boots with hidden elevated heels. The costume department commissioned a Hollywood bootmaker to create motorcycle boots with 3-inch internal heel lifts. These weren't obvious platform shoes. The elevation was hidden inside the boot construction, making Brando appear to stand 6 feet tall without looking like he was wearing lifts. The elevated boots created unexpected problems with motorcycle operation. The extra heel height changed Brando's relationship with the foot controls. The brake pedal and shift lever were now at awkward angles that required ankle positions Brando found uncomfortable. The production's mechanics had to modify both foot controls, repositioning them 3 inches higher to accommodate the boot heels. This created a bizarre situation in which Brando's bike had controls and positions completely different from those on standard Thunderbirds. Stunt doubles couldn't ride Brando's hero bike without adjusting to the strange control placement. The elevated boots also affected Brando's balance when stopped. The extra height raised his center of gravity, making the already heavy Thunderbird feel even more unwieldy. Brando reportedly hated the boots, but understood they made him look more commanding on camera. Number 7. The seat was filled with foam rubber, not horsehair standard Triumph. Thunderbird seats used traditional horsehair padding covered in leather. Brando's bike featured something completely different. The seat was filled with experimental foam rubber, a relatively new material in 1953. This modification happened because Brando developed severe saddle soreness during the first week of filming. The horsehair padding was unforgiving, designed for experienced riders who knew how to properly position their weight. Brando, still learning to ride, sat incorrectly, resulting in painful pressure sores. After Brando missed a half day of filming due to discomfort, the prop department contacted a military supplier, which provided foam rubber used in aircraft seats. This material offered superior cushioning and pressure distribution. The foam rubber seat improved Brando's comfort. He could sit on the bike for hours without pain. However, the foam created a different problem. It compressed significantly under Brando's weight, lowering his seat height by nearly 2 inches. This affected his leg position and required further modifications to the foot controls. The foam also retained heat, making the seat uncomfortably warm during sunny location shooting. Despite these drawbacks, the foam rubber seat was essential to meeting the production schedule. Interestingly, Triumph later adopted foam rubber seats on its production motorcycles, partially influenced by feedback from the production team for the Wild One. Number 6. The bike's registration. Was fake, creating legal problems? The Triumph Thunderbird displayed a California license plate throughout the film, but that registration was completely fraudulent. The prop department created fake plates and registration documents, but did not register the motorcycle with the California Department of Motor Vehicles. This seemed harmless until location filming in public spaces required the bikes to be street legal. California Highway Patrol officers conducting routine security checks during a location to shoot discovered the fake registration. Technically, the production was operating unregistered vehicles on public roads, a serious violation. The studio faced potential impoundment of all 3 Thunderbirds plus substantial fines. Columbia's legal team negotiated frantically with the CHP and DMV. They argued the motorcycles were props, not vehicles, and therefore exempt from registration requirements. California law in 1953 had no clear provisions for film vehicles, creating a legal gray area. The compromise required Columbia to obtain temporary operating permits for each bike, valid only during filming hours on approved locations. The permits cost more than registering the bikes properly would have, but avoided the delay of full registration processing. This incident led California to establish formal procedures for film vehicle permits, regulations still in use today. The fake license plates visible in the film bear numbers that never existed in California's registration system, a detail that troubles historical vehicle researchers. Number 5. The front fender was removed after it flew off. During filming the Triumph, Thunderbird originally had a front fender, visible in very early publicity stills. That fender disappeared after a terrifying incident during the second week of filming. During a moderately fast riding scene, the front fender's mounting bolts vibrated loose and the entire fender dropped onto the front wheel. The spinning wheel grabbed the fender and jammed it into the fork tubes, locking the front wheel instantly. Bud Eakins, doubling for Brando at that moment, barely avoided a catastrophic crash through extraordinary skill and luck. He managed to release the front brake and clutch simultaneously while the bike slid sideways, ultimately stopping without falling. The locked wheel left a dramatic black streak on the pavement and destroyed the front tire. When mechanics examined the fender, they discovered the mounting bolts had been improperly installed with insufficient thread engagement. The vibration from riding had slowly backed them out. Rather than risk another failure, Director Benedek ordered the front fenders removed from all 3 motorcycles immediately. The fenderless look was never intended, but became one of the bike's most distinctive features. Removing the front fender actually improved the Thunderbird's aggressive appearance, emphasizing the exposed front wheel and fork tubes. This accidental modification influenced custom motorcycle builders for decades, with the fenderless front ends becoming standard practice in chopper culture. Number 4. The clutch was modified to require half the normal pressure. Brando's inexperienced left hand couldn't handle the Thunderbird's heavy clutch pull. Stock Triumph clutches required approximately 40 pounds of force to fully disengage, exhausting for novice riders during long filming days. After watching Brando struggle through multiple takes with a fatiguing clutch hand, the stunt coordinator ordered a complete clutch system modification. The mechanics installed lighter clutch springs, reducing pull effort to roughly 20 pounds. They also modified the clutch lever with a different pivot ratio that provided mechanical advantage. The result was a clutch that engaged and disengaged with half the normal effort. The modification made Brando's life easier, but created new problems. The lightened clutch was prone to slipping under hard acceleration because the springs didn't clamp the friction plates firmly enough. The bike would rev freely without transferring power to the rear wheel. This was unacceptable for action scenes requiring quick acceleration. The solution required 2 different clutch configurations. Brando's hero bike kept the light clutch for close-ups and dialogue scenes. The stunt bike retained a stock heavy clutch that could handle aggressive riding without slipping. Mechanics could switch configurations in about 90 minutes when scene requirements changed. This dual clutch approach added complexity to production, but was necessary to accommodate Brando's limitations while maintaining performance capabilities for stunt work. Number 3. The rear tire was deliberately overinflated for aesthetic reasons. The Thunderbird's rear tire ran at 52 psi throughout filming, dramatically overinflated compared to the recommended 32 psi. This dangerous modification happened purely for visual aesthetics. The cinematographer noticed that properly inflated tires looked slightly saggy on camera, with visible sidewall bulge that made the bike appear heavy and sluggish. Overinflating the rear tire eliminated the sidewall bulge, creating a taut, aggressive profile that looked faster and more dynamic on film. The rock-hard tire also sat slightly taller, giving the bike a more aggressive stance. However, overinflation created serious safety risks. The tire's contact patch with the road was significantly reduced, decreasing traction for acceleration and braking. The hard tire provided almost no suspension compliance, making the ride harsh and jarring over any road imperfection. Most dangerous was the increased risk of blowouts. Operating a tire at 60% above recommended pressure stressed the casing beyond design limits. The production experienced 2 rear tire failures during filming, both occurring during relatively gentle riding. Fortunately, neither resulted in crashes. After the second failure, the tire pressure was reduced slightly to 45 psi, as a compromise between aesthetics and safety. Even at this reduced pressure, the tire remained dangerously overinflated by any reasonable standard. The hard rear tire contributed to Brando's difficulty controlling the bike, making it skittish and unpredictable during cornering. Number 2. The Kickstarter was modified. Because Brando couldn't start the bike. Triumph Thunderbirds featured notoriously difficult kickstarters, requiring precise technique and significant leg strength. Brando couldn't start his bike reliably, a humiliating problem for someone playing the ultimate rebel biker. During early filming, Brando would attempt to kickstart the Thunderbird for multiple takes, sweating and straining, while the engine refused to fire. Production assistants would eventually start the bike off camera, but this wasted time and embarrassed Brando. The solution came from the chief mechanic, who completely redesigned the kickstart mechanism. He modified the compression release, installed a lighter kickstart spring, and changed the kickstart shaft ratio to provide more mechanical leverage. Most significantly, he fitted a small electric starter motor hidden inside the primary case, powered by a beefed-up battery. The electric starter was activated by a hidden button disguised as a toolbox mounting bolt. Brando could casually lean down, press the secret button, and the engine would fire instantly, while he simultaneously kicked the kickstarter for appearance. The modification worked flawlessly. Brando looked competent starting his bike throughout the film, while actually using an electric starter that wouldn't be factory equipped on Triumphs for another 15 years. The hidden electric starter remained secret until the bike's restoration decades later, when mechanics discovered the custom fabricated starter motor still installed in the primary case. Number 1. The bike started a moral panic that got the film banned in Britain. The Triumph Thunderbird didn't just appear in a controversial film. It became the symbol of a moral panic that led to the Wild One being banned in Great Britain for 14 years. British censors were horrified by the film's portrayal of motorcycle gang violence. The British Board of Film Censors refused to grant the film a certificate, effectively banning it from British theaters until 1968. The irony was devastating. A British motorcycle had become the symbol of everything Britain was trying to suppress. British authorities worried the film would inspire motorcycle gang formation and juvenile delinquency. Their fears weren't unfounded. America experienced a surge in motorcycle gang activity after the film's release. British censors decided their nation wouldn't suffer the same fate. Triumph found itself in an impossible position. Their motorcycle was famous in America, but associated with banned content in their home country. British Triumph dealers couldn't advertise the Thunderbird's film appearance. Mentioning the Wild One in marketing materials would acknowledge the banned film's existence. The situation created a bizarre cultural divide. American riders celebrated the Thunderbird as the ultimate rebel bike, while British riders couldn't legally watch the film that made it famous. When Britain finally lifted the ban in 1968, an entire generation had missed the film's original cultural impact. The Thunderbird had become a legend in absentia, famous for a film British audiences couldn't see. The Triumph Thunderbird became more than Marlon Brando's motorcycle. It became a cultural lightning rod that defined rebellion, influenced motorcycle design for decades, and weathered controversies ranging from paint color to international bans. These 20 facts reveal the chaos, creativity, and accidents that created an icon.